All right. Hello, hello, hello. We are super excited to have everybody here today. It looks like we already got 86 people waiting on this stream to start. So there is lots of interest in this, and I am very excited about that. I'm going to vamp for just a moment here while I look at the chat, and I want y'all to make sure, let me know if you can hear me okay or not. I have started these before and then realized a couple minutes in that nobody could hear me. But while I do that and wait for those messages to come in, I just want to say welcome to everybody. We're super excited to have you joining us here today. I think this is probably going to be one of the best things we've ever put together. It's going to be packed full of advice on exactly how you can go through these same processes to make your websites run a whole lot faster with Perfmatters. We have a lot of things to get to today. If you could see the notes that Brian has put together, you'd be as overwhelmed as I was. So I want to just get a few little housekeeping things out of the way before we get started, and then we'll get going. So first, I just want to say a huge thanks to Brian for putting all this together for us. He has gone absolutely above and beyond what I ever imagined as far as putting together, going through the process and everything beforehand to make sure everything would run as easily as it could during this stream. So we did have Brian on before a few months back. If you missed that, we did nearly a 2-hour live stream where he went through every single setting inside of Perfmatters and explained exactly how it works. If you haven't seen that, there's a link down in the description below. You can check that out. And I wanted to say, we typically try to take questions during these calls. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on it and interject if there's some huge confusion. But I will say, go ahead. If you're going to leave a question in the chat, leave us context so we know what you're talking about. Sometimes you'll ask a question that has to do with what we're looking at that exact second. And when we come back to it later, it's hard to know what you were talking about when you asked that question. If you haven't picked up a copy of Perfmatters yet, our affiliate link is down in the description. Using that doesn't cost you anything, but it does help support us a bunch so we can continue making content like this. And lastly, if you're not familiar with the admin bar, I just wanted to say welcome. We're super glad to have you. We have about 6,000 people inside of our Facebook group community, all WordPress freelancers and agency owners. We put on events like this pretty regularly. So if this is up your alley, you can hit the subscribe button down here and you can catch more of these calls. And all the links to our website, community, all that is down in the description. So, Brian, I'm going to shut up now, and I'm just going to say hello and good morning to you. And thank you so much for doing this. And I'm wondering if you would just kick things off to let people know a little bit about yourself and what you do, so those that aren't familiar with you can get a little familiar.
Yeah, and sorry if I'm a little distracted here. I'm still getting stuff ready. Lots to do here. So yeah, I'm a co-founder of Perfmatters. My brother and I run a little agency where we have our Perfmatters plugin and our Novashare plugin that we primarily focus on. Both are focused on performance, kind of. And that's pretty much what we do full time. So yeah, today I'm excited to kind of run through for a second time, kind of a different area of Perfmatters than we tackled in the first video that we did with you. But yeah, yeah, excited to get started here. And yeah, we do have a lot to get through. So I'm probably going to go quick. So yeah, I guess for people, if they do miss something, I think this will be available later, right? As a recording.
Yeah. This same link will have the replay. And when I have some time, probably this weekend, I'll go through and put timestamps on everything so you can go back and easily find things. We do have 2 different websites we're going to try to tackle today. One is built with GenerateBlocks and GeneratePress. The other one is built with Elementor. I think we're going to start with the GenerateBlocks one and take a look at that first. But I did want to kind of look at 2 different scenarios here. So if you're ready, Brian, I'll just hand it over to you and let you get started.
Yeah, let's see here. Let's get started here. So I will share my screen.
Got your screen. Looks good.
Okay, so I think the first thing I wanted to go through was just a couple just speed testing tools that we use on a regular basis. So I usually recommend using PageSpeed Insights, GTmetrix, and Chrome DevTools. Those are the 3 that I use on a regular basis. So if you're speed testing your site, you really can't go wrong those 3. And I can just show you here too. So PageSpeed Insights, this is the one we're talking about here. Then GTmetrix here is what we're talking about here. So these are what I primarily use every day. And Chrome DevTools for those that are a little more advanced. And we'll actually show you like how to use some Chrome DevTools here in this video as well. And then some other tools that are great. Maybe we can link these in the blog post or video show notes afterwards, like WebPageTest, Waterfaller, web.dev. I know you use that one, Kyle, for It also shows like SEO, accessibility, kind of other kind of cool stats too. Yellow Lab tools is my page cached. These are just a couple free tools I kind of used for different areas. Like Yellow Lab tools is actually great for like debugging font files, how big your DOM is, really more complicated stuff. But again, if you're just starting out, I would just stick with PageSpeed Insights, GTmetrix. That's going to be all we're using today, actually. So
perfect. And I'm going to try to grab some of those links from your notes here and drop them in the chat, but I will include all those afterwards when we put together some kind of post on all this.
Cool. Yeah. And there's also another one called Chckr, which is kind of a really cool little tool a guy made that like literally has kind of, you put in the URL and then you can click the link to go to each speed test tool and it kind of ports the URL across. So kind of like a portal to start optimizing, and then it you go from there. So that one might actually be really great for beginners too.
Perfect. I'm putting them all in the chat now.
And also, if you see me looking off the screen here, I do have show notes that I have so much today that I had to actually write notes for this. So if you see me going back and forth, it's because I'm looking at another monitor here. So a few tips before we get started. And these are just like general tips that I always do. I always recommend doing, and maybe will help you. Even if it's just one of them might stick out and say like, oh, maybe I'm doing that, I should maybe stop. So first thing is you should never combine your CSS and JS files anymore. This is an old technique. It's still sitting around. It's very annoying for people that are trying to focus on the newer side of things. Whereas since HTTP2 came out, which is kind of a newer, faster protocol, in most cases, it's actually slower to combine your files because the protocol was designed to load individual files in parallel faster. So, and now we're actually at HTTP3. So these are things that are powered by like Cloudflare. If you're using Cloudflare, you're probably on HTTP3, which is the newest version of this that's out there. So combining files is pretty much a big no-no. If you're trying to just trick scores on PageSpeed Insights, you might get lucky sometimes with combining files and try to hide some of these warnings. But again, if you're going for straight performance, I always recommend don't combine your files anymore. Google reCAPTCHA. This is another one I see all the time in client sites and tickets. It's a performance killer. Unfortunately, it's horrible. Remember, these Google teams work separately. They don't care about the Google reCAPTCHA team, whoever is coding that. They don't care about PageSpeed Insights and they don't care about Core Web Vitals. So just don't use it. There's other great alternatives like WP Armor is a free plugin out there. He has a great pro version of it too. It's kind of like a honeypot plugin as a replacement. I always recommend using that instead, if you can, instead of Google reCAPTCHA. I've literally seen reCAPTCHA drop scores by 30 points, literally by itself. So that's really how bad it is. Sliders, ditch your sliders, animated sliders. Go for static headers. You'll see here in these sites that we use that Kyle built, they're beautiful, but you'll notice too that he's not using sliders. And I can tell you that he probably did this for a reason. And it's because he's built enough sites to know that once you start adding animations and all this stuff, it's just, that's where your sites start to slow down. Static sliders, we'll actually use a slider example later here too, and I will show you how to kind of optimize it too. So you can use them if you need to, just I try to stay away from them if you can. Animations with Elementor. If you're using Elementor, you have to be more careful than if you're using something like GenerateBlocks. And this is where animations use JavaScript. JavaScript uses CPU to rendering time. So every single little animation, like a pop-in or a coming from the sides, or I see all the time, all of those use CPU time, and all of those add to the total load of a page. So every single one of those is, in my opinion, is a big no-no. Now, obviously, some clients want those, and you have to find a good middle ground sometimes. But you'll also notice on both these sites that Kyle doesn't have any animations either. I never asked Kyle about this, but I think it's because he's done this long enough that he's just going for straight performance, and your site can still look beautiful without animations. I think,
and there are some ways you can use CSS animations to still get things to fade in and things. The only restriction is it's all going to happen above the fold, right? Because it's going to happen immediately when the page loads. So, but if you don't need things to load in and animate in as people scroll, you can still do some of those things that look really nice, and the CSS isn't going to have much performance problems there.
And I should mention that there is a big difference between CSS and JS too. And we'll go into that a little bit here too. Let's see here. Anything else? Google Maps, just be careful with Google Maps on pages. I always recommend, those are hard to optimize. So I always recommend like be creative, like do a picture of the Google map and have it just click over into Google Maps. How many people actually go on their phone and scroll to make it bigger on the actual website? They don't, they click into it to take it on their phone. So think about that, stuff like that, just be a little more creative. And then I highly recommend Cloudflare, but it can also hurt your performance too. If they have a lot of security things, and if you go too hard into the security, it can actually hurt your site performance wise. So I have a doc, maybe Kyle can link that too, where we on our Perfmatters site where all our recommended Cloudflare settings. And that's what we use on all of our sites. So I do recommend Cloudflare though for everybody. Okay, so we'll
pull
dive
that link and put it in the chat too.
Okay, great. We'll dive into this first site here. So let's go here. Let me just show you what the site looks like actually first.
And I will say, as he pulls that up, these are real live websites that I built.
Yes.
We did pull them over onto a staging URL just because he was going to have to do so much testing to get all this. So these aren't the actual like live domain, but it's the exact copy of these live sites. So,
yep. And so, yeah, this is a site that Kyle built. And this is using GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. So the second site we'll go into is using Elementor. We kind of wanted to show both. I know I use GeneratePress for literally every product I work on. I know Kyle has been using GeneratePress a lot lately. And I think when you started using it like a year ago, so right?
GenerateBlocks basically about a year ago. I started switching everything over to that. As far as a theme, even a lot of my Elementor sites had the GeneratePress theme on it. I just wasn't doing much with the theme.
Cool. So yeah, we both, highly recommend this. But obviously, we also know too that when you're working with clients, sometimes you have to use, what they have. And so like that's a lot of people are using Elementor. I would say probably 85% of the client sites we work on are probably using Elementor. And then it's a mix match of other things for other clients. So let's see here. So another thing we'll point out on this site is running on Cloudways and it's using the Breeze cache plugin. I do recommend Breeze if you're using Cloudways just because it ties in with their own caching environment better. Usually I recommend using whatever environment you're using for their plugin, like SiteGround, use the SiteGround plugin because it ties in with their caching better. So just think about that. The second site, well, we'll go into that here later. Let's focus on this one here. So first, I think we'll just pull over here. So a couple things here. This is just a site, unoptimized, mobile. Now you can see we're already scoring pretty well. And this is because I want to make a point of this is because he's using GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. That's why he's already ahead of the game. But you can still see here, there's things that need to be optimized. This is not where I would ever leave a site, in my opinion. But just it's important to note that a lot of your work will be done for you if you start with a good base. So like good host, GeneratePress, GenerateBlocks, stuff like that. So let's get into the next thing here. So first thing we'll go into is the quick toggles in our Perfmatters plugin. Now I'm going to go quick here. These are actually the ones that I do all the time here.
And if you do want to get more information on every one of these toggles of what they do, the little tooltips next to all of them go to documentation that explain everything. Or like I said, there's a video down in the description where me and Brian went through all these one by one. So yeah.
And I will say on a GeneratePress site, this is actually pretty common for stuff I would just go right off the bat. Like jQuery migrate is probably not needed on GeneratePress sites. So just stuff like this. We're going to leave all the other stuff down there. It's not optimization. We'll save the changes here. So that's it for the quick toggles here, just short and quick. So then we're going to kind of dive into some render blocking resources here. So now on this site, we actually don't have any JS that's typically render blocking. So on a GeneratePress site, you can kind of get lucky sometimes, although some GeneratePress sites, you might have 30 other plugins that are loading JS too. So you might end up running into deferred JS anyways, but this is where the deferred JS would show up. We're going to just enable it anyways, because it's always good practice. So here, go defer JavaScript. And that's pretty much actually it for there. Again, it's not going to be doing much on this site. It will actually on the Elementor site more when we get into that one later. Defer basically just moves JavaScript to the bottom of the waterfall. So it takes wherever it's loading, puts it down to the bottom, and that helps with the render blocking issue of JavaScript. Pretty much that's all it does. Now we'll go into the unused CSS. So this here is something you want to be on GeneratePress. There is one thing you want to be aware of. And I don't think I changed this back, but I'll show you what I mean here. If you're using unused CSS from anybody, like even if you're using it from like WP Rocket or some other plugin, even not Perfmatters, you want to try to always get your files separate for CSS. So if your theme page builder, in this case, is GeneratePress, they have an option to do inline embedding. Now, I think this is actually off by default, but a lot of clients I see flip things around that they don't know what they're doing, and they'll end up back on this one, and then something doesn't work. So make sure your dynamic print in the customizer for GeneratePress is set to external files. So that's actually very important. And then you can also do this cache CSS thing, but the external files is what you want to do here. I'll just regenerate that here. So now we're going to go back to unused CSS. We're going to flip it on. And again, this is what we're trying to fix here. There's not much again on this site. Remember, GeneratePress, it's good to go from the beginning most of the time. But we're seeing some from the block library, which actually this is from WordPress core itself. So you can see here, though, potential savings, 11.6 out of 11.7. So that means 99% of that file is not being used. So it's pretty much a waste. And even that 0.1 kilobyte, you might get away with disabling the whole file and might be okay in this instance. If you get into like 60, 70%, then you're going to get into more trouble. But in this instance, we're just going to let the unused CSS clean it up, not worry about it. So we'll go back to our site here. There's a couple options here. You can do inline or file. We're going to do file for this. File has the benefit of actually being cached by the browser. So if you do inline, it just inlines the code. And if you're not using like a full page cache solution, or if you're like on a WooCommerce site that's less cached to begin with, like lots of WooCommerce sites have dynamic portions more than other sites. Inline stuff has to load on every page load if that page isn't cached, or if it's having to recache. So file is sometimes better for caching long-term, especially on heavily cached sites. So I always use file on our sites, just an FYI. Style sheet behavior. You have three options here: delay, async, remove. Delay is what I recommend for normal users just starting out. 99% of the time, I probably say delay. What this does is your unused CSS is, the used CSS is parsed by a library we have in Perfmatters into a file. Then the additional CSS is still loaded after the page loads. So if something was still needed, like say below the fold or in the footer, it will still get loaded from the CSS file loading after the fact. So it kind of helps performance, but still helps fix things if it's needed later, essentially.
Gotcha.
Async is kind of a middle ground. It will load the files as it goes along with the UCSS. However, you're not going to get as much performance gains out of there because it's kind of trying to do everything all at once. Still good for performance, better than not using it at all. But again, it's going to be a lot worse than delay. Remove is actually the best for performance. However, it also takes the most amount of time to configure. If you use remove, you're going to see things that are probably going to break, or not break, but like little tweaks here and there. And I would set aside some time to like just go through your site if you're using remove. So on some of our sites, I do use remove, but I've taken, maybe an hour or two to go through everything and just get it right. But then I do use delay on some of our other sites too, just because I haven't even had the time to do any of that. So I use a mix and match of that. But if you're going for the best performance and have time and maybe have done more CSS before in the past and know how to track some stuff down, remove is really, really powerful. So then we'll go down here. One thing to be aware of too is page unused CSS is generated per page. Post CSS, unused CSS, used CSS is generated for the whole site once. So it's shared. So imagine you have 1,000 blog posts. Think of the CSS on those posts. Most of the time is going to be shared across all those posts. Like you're not changing CSS for your design on many posts. So the nice thing about that performance-wise is we only have to generate the used CSS for blog posts one time. So it's really not taxing on the server at all. Super quick, super lightweight. And then for pages, it is unique per page because obviously pages you could, a lot of times they're completely different. So you pretty much have to do that. So we will go in File, Delay. We will save that here. And we will clear the cache here. And you'll see me clearing the cache here probably a lot back and forth.
Is it easier, or would it be better to just turn caching off while you do all these optimizations and then turn it back on when you're done? Or do you prefer to just leave it on?
No, that's fine, because I do want to show kind of with the cache on. Otherwise, some people might think something's not working. Sometimes when you turn the cache off, it'll just throw all these other warnings and then. So,
gotcha.
But yeah, we should be fine here. And then let me actually open up. Whenever you do unused CSS, any optimization, I always recommend, going to the site, checking to make sure it looks okay. So we're going to open up a new incognito window. Unused CSS only loads on the front end. Another thing to be aware of. So if you're looking logged in, that's not actually going to do anything. So we're going to pull up Chrome DevTools here, actually. You could use GTmetrix for this too. I'm just going to use this because it's quicker here. We can see here that there's this front.used.css has been loaded for the home page. So now if we look at this again before I move my mouse, you'll notice that there's no CSS. I hope this is big enough too on the screen there.
Yeah, I think you're okay.
But we'll see that there's nothing down there. And then if we move our mouse up here, we can see that everything was there. And actually, I think I can zoom this. Whoa, that actually might be a little too big for me, actually. Okay, so that's pretty much how it works. Now on this side, I've kind of gone through. I really haven't, with GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks, to be honest, you're not going to really need any exceptions just because of how it's coded. So we'll go back. We will run this here again. I might leave this beginning one up here first. We'll run this through here.
It'd be good to see the before and after. So leaving the old one there is definitely good.
So we can see here. Yeah, actually, this will help a lot. I can go talk about it. So unused CSS warning completely gone. It's no longer there. Eliminate render blocking resources is another thing I should have said. Is unused CSS will also help clear up render blocking CSS. So obviously, if it's getting cleaned up and taken apart by our thing, it's no longer there to be render blocking. So, or if it's getting delayed after the fact or something like that, it's no longer render blocking. So like the block library script, it's pretty much stripped apart and no longer there, except for that one little kilobyte, which is loaded in that used CSS file. So that's no longer render blocking. So now all we have is that Google fonts, but you can see the other style sheets now are cleaned up as well. So we went from, actually it's hurting us even more now. But that is because the PageSpeed Insights, they take sometimes and see like what is hurting you the most now. And we've cleaned up the other things. So now that's hurting us more. Now, if we run this again, it might drop again a little bit too. But I wouldn't worry too much about that as far as just looking at these over time. So we have one thing left there, but we can see unused CSS is working. We will go to the next thing here.
And it is funny you mentioned that earlier about Google Maps being a performance problem and reCAPTCHA being a performance problem. And, Google Fonts also a performance problem. So it's like everything Google does, Google doesn't like people using that, when it comes to PageSpeed Insights.
Exactly.
Funny.
And the most frustrating part is they're the ones that are implementing Core Web Vitals and causing us to do all this stuff to try to get our site super fast. So the teams just don't talk to each other, and they don't care about one department to the next, unfortunately. Let's see here. I might actually show this here. We'll come back to that on the other side maybe here, since I've already done this. Google Fonts. Let's do this here. So we want to kind of clean up that Google font issue here. Like, we don't want something really render blocking just for this little tiny font file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to fonts in Perfmatters. We're going to enable local fonts here. Actually, I'm going to do this one first here. And we can, let's go back to the site here. We'll look at the fonts. So if you see here, we have 2 Google fonts. So we're doing 2 things. We're clearing up the render blocking issue, and we're actually optimizing the Google fonts. We're moving them from loading from Google, which also is slower because it has to reach out to Google and then do a DNS request and do all this stuff. So everything you can get on your site itself, loading from one area is the best, especially if you're using like Cloudflare. Then it just means you hit your site, it all loads from your Cloudflare connection, and boom, you're good to go. So that's what we're trying to do here. So we see the fonts there. We're going to enable local Google fonts.
There's also the GDPR concerns with loading from Google's servers as well. So you kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone here.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I have been seeing that a lot lately with the GDPR stuff. So yeah, anything you can get on your site with any third-party resource, always better for privacy and security. So cleared the cache. We'll go back here, do a refresh. And now we can see that these files are actually now loading from this Perfmatters folder, but you can see they're actually on this domain now instead of coming from Google. So what we'll do then next is, let's go back here. Actually, I'm going to regenerate this. So we also have this other warning from Google. You're kind of trying to do all these at the once here, so sorry about that. But
no, you're good.
These ensure text remains visible during web font load. The way Google loads them, they're not available right now. And Google actually, I don't know why they do this, because they provide a way to fix this. Now, many theme developers haven't always implemented this. And some do have toggles to turn this on now. So this is getting better, and hopefully this will just go away eventually altogether. We can even remove it out of Perfmatters. But for right now, if you see this warning, it means display swap for their fonts needs to be turned on. What that means is while the page is loading, fonts will default back to system fonts on your OS and then flip to Google once those fonts are ready. So the problem with Google fonts is they might not be ready right away, and it's causing issues. So we will turn display swap on. So those will just fall back to system fonts and switch to Google when they're ready. Here. We're just going to clear the local fonts again here. Okay, and we will go back. Actually, before I run the speed test, PageSpeed Insights keeps putting in these annoying limits that you can't run it like right after. So I'm going to check something first here.
I've noticed that as well.
Before we run the speed test. So I'm just checking the CSS file that we're adding with Perfmatters to make sure swap is in there since we toggled that on. I just want to make sure that's in there before we run the speed tester again. So there. Okay, run this.
Stephen in the chat here, while we're waiting for that to load, he said, does turning on the swap introduce CLS?
It doesn't actually. That's the exact thing I'm going to go to next.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. Let's see. So now you can see we actually got quite a big score, and I noticed this on the site too as well. Like Google was actually hurting the site quite a bit compared to, because you saw we cleaned up Unused CSS. We were still at kind of like a 92-ish, I think, before.
Yeah.
We just jumped to a 99. All we did was change the fonts. That's literally all we did. Now, again, if you run these tests, sometimes it'll bounce between. But I noticed this when I was setting this up too, that the fonts had a big impact on the site. So just moving your fonts locally does a lot more than I think some people realize. So it is an important thing to do on any site. So if we go down now, we can see the Google font render blocking issues gone, where all the render blocking issues are gone. If we go to font during web font load, no warning, we'll go back, no longer there. So we're good to go as far as Google fonts go. Now, it can introduce CLS sometimes. See how we have 0 here, and then we have 0.1 here. Now, this is not very much on this site. You'll see this kind of more on like bigger sites where you have, say, 4 fonts and Elementor running. You'll see much bigger CLS. So when it comes to this, you can preload your fonts to kind of fix the, now it's kind of silly because we're moving the fonts locally, we're doing the displays off, and then we're preloading them. Like, why can't themes just implement Google fonts the right way to begin with? That was my question. But we do with what we have to use with what we have. So,
and I mean, for me, and maybe you have different standards than me, but if I run this test and see the CLS is 0.001, I'm probably just leaving that alone. But you know,
well, and we'll see here, I might not be able to clean this up. I did get 0 a lot of my tests, but sometimes it bounced back and forth. So sometimes you can't always get it 100%. I will say that, even with preloading the fonts there, even though it is doing, usually that's what's causing it. So like if we look here, it is most likely coming from the font here. So we can see the CLS here, contribution. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to reload this. We're actually going to grab the font files. Now, I will say, as I'm doing this, make sure I got that first one, that we probably are going to add an option just to preload your fonts automatically. We've been meaning to do that, and we've been talking about it. We've had other things come up. But you can go to GTmetrix or Chrome DevTools, grab your font files as generating. GTmetrix is probably easier for most. And you're just going to add those font files in here to preload them. We're going to choose font, hit cross origin. Normally you'll want cross origin on for fonts. We have this in our docs too on our site. So there's our local fonts, preload section. We're going to save changes.
And for anybody that couldn't see that as he was copying and pasting, he was just grabbing the URL for those font files and pasting them in here. So pretty easy to do. Like you said, on GTmetrix, you can see the whole string really easily. So if you run it through there, it's pretty easy to grab.
Yeah, it might be easier for folks if they're used to this tool to, now these are still at Google because we haven't rerun this test yet, but like you could grab them from the font section right here is where the Perfmatters fonts would show up. So we'll go back here. We will clear the cache again, although it looked like Breeze actually clears things automatically sometimes when you click save in plugins. I don't know if they started doing that recently. It's actually kind of handy. I noticed that, or maybe it's only on staging. That's kind of nice. But
yeah, I want to say there's a setting for it, but like you, I haven't found that I hadn't found the rhythm to it, whether they do it every time or there's some scenarios where it does it.
So then you may be hitting clear cache anyways, maybe because you don't know the rhythm. So now we'll go down to, let's see here. Oh yeah, my notes, I was going to mention the GTmetrix thing. We did that. So let's run this again here and we'll see if the CLS goes away. Now again, when it comes to 0.01, this can be tricky and might not always go.
We're splitting hairs at that point. I don't think anybody's going to be too upset.
Okay, so we did get rid of it here. But again, later on, we might see this come back. But again, on bigger sites with like 4 or 6 fonts running Elementor, you're going to see like, you could see like 0.2 CLS, like huge CLS, and it's coming from fonts. And if you add the fonts there, it will clear up a ginormous amount of CLS. It could. So this is not the greatest example for the CLS on this site, but
you should probably also try to not use 5 or 6 fonts on your website. Two is probably good.
Yep. And I use system fonts on all my sites, so I actually don't use Google fonts at all on my sites. But again, if you're a designer, I completely understand. And I know, Kyle, I know you like fonts too. So, I mean, obviously they look pretty. So You got to
I
find.
also don't run
medium.
on Mac, so my system fonts aren't as pretty as yours. So
That is true. That is true. If I was still on Windows, I'd probably stare at my site and be like, okay. But again, I'm not building for clients, so I would totally be using Google Fonts if I was an agency like building and designing websites for clients. So you got to find the happy medium with all this stuff. So use fewer Google Fonts is the solution. Okay, so the next we're going to go to, this is another thing I wanted to show. So you can see here, LCP is really the big thing left. We have to tackle on this site. Like if this is what we need to fix. Now, if we look at GTmetrix here, I wanted to point something out. As far as LCP, I think these were added recently, actually, but they added these little labels on every little thing here, which is actually very helpful because if you go to PageSpeed Insights and go to LCP, I see response time and I see largest contentful paint element. Now, this means it's actually how it's loading. And you can see element paint within the viewport. It means that's what's causing like the load time to cause the LCP to get higher. It's the biggest thing in the load. Now you can't really, you can optimize the image, like compress it more, but a lot of times I know on your sites, Kyle, like that you've already probably compressed them or they're already good to go because you're using like Short Pixel or Magify or something like that. So you'll probably see this warning anyway. So you can't really compress it more to fix that or speed that up. You can preload it. Now we're going to get into that a little later, but I wanted to show that if you go to LCP here on GTmetrix and look at all the LCP tags, it actually shows you more than PageSpeed Insights does, which I've been using this myself even lately to see like, see here, LCP. Oh, it's impacted by not just that big image at the top. It's actually impacted by all of these resources. So even the font, now we're showing a Google font here, but I need to rerun this. But even these fonts that are further down the fold are impacting the LCP. And let's see here, render blocking resources. Actually, here, let me rerun this actually really quick. Let's see a better image.
Yeah, and while you rerun it, I wanted to comment. Diana said in here, holy crap, turning off combining JS and CSS did increase my scores for between 30 and 40%. Thank you guys.
Oh, so wow. Yeah.
Already got a win.
Yeah. So that might not always be the case, but in general, it's faster to load. Now, and if it isn't the case, you should still uncombine them and then use a tool like Perfmatters or WP Rocket or something that needs the files uncombined to begin with to do their work. Like we need your files uncombined to really grab them and do the work with it. So regardless of what you're doing, just uncombine the files. Okay, so we'll go back here. We're going to look at LCP again quick. So there's less now because we did all that other stuff, but we can still see here that all these images on the page are contributing to LCP. Whereas if you had just looked at PageSpeed Insights, you would think like, it's just this one big image at the top. So I see tickets all the time that I'm pointing this out now. They're like, oh, okay, it's not just this one image causing all this problem with LCP. It's actually other things too. And then server response time as well, though we can see that here. So what we're going to do is work on the LCP now. So we're going to enable lazy loading because obviously some of these images that are below the fold are actually contributing to the LCP. So we're going to go over to Perfmatters. We're going to enable lazy loading. By default, you shouldn't lazy load things that are above the fold. And that's because lazy loading, basically it delays them and it causes it can cause CLS, it can cause blinks, it can cause all sorts of stuff. So things above the fold, you typically want to load right away. And that will help as well with the order of what things are loading with. So I typically use a 1 or 2 here. If you do a 1, it's obviously going to pick up the logo probably here, which is always good. I typically do 2 just to be safe. Sometimes it's a little better to be safe sometimes rather than get it right on the dot, because if you're lazy loading everything else, it's still okay. You don't always have to be exactly perfect. And I'm just going to enable iframes, even though I don't think we have any iframes or videos on the site here. We're going to click add missing dimensions. GeneratePress is pretty good about this. But if you have any warnings about missing image dimensions, you can toggle that on here, then we'll try to fix it for you automatically. We will save changes. You can also exclude images manually in here. So like if you didn't want to use our automatic exclude leading images from the top to the bottom, you could add the logo in there manually too. So that's another option.
Yeah, and like on this site, obviously we have the logo that's on every page, and then the hero, there's like a image in the hero of every page, and on top of it is like I used a before and after pseudo element to put the little box image and another little image. So I could go through and actually just go ahead and put those in there. So because they're going to load on every page anyways.
And sometimes you do have to tweak it more, because I know in GeneratePress, it's different kind of on everything. That's why it's a little annoying. Is when we do the exclude leading images, all we have is the HTML to look at, the DOM. So we have to go by whatever code you have. Now in GeneratePress, they load their mobile logo. If you're using the mobile, a different logo for mobile, they load that code right below the desktop logo in the HTML. So if you look at the DOM HTML of this site, basically you have your desktop logo, your mobile logo, and then that hero image right there. So if you just did 2 for exclude leading images, we're going to be grabbing just those 2 in the HTML first, and we're going to ignore that hero one. Do you see what I mean?
Gotcha.
So sometimes it's not always perfect, but that's where you can go add manual ones in there. You can go, I mean, if you wanted to go per page and just add the hero ones manually, you could do that. You could up it to 3 for exclude leading images. So there's a lot of tweaking you can do. Usually you can get it to where you want it with a few tweaks. What we're going to do though is, so we have 12 images here loading. So I haven't cleared the cache yet, or at least hopefully didn't. Yeah, I think that looks like they're not lazy loaded yet, because I don't see our script here. So without lazy loading on, we have about 12 images going. So what we're going to do is I'm going to clear the cache again, make sure. Here, we'll come back. We will refresh. And now we still have 12. Now, this is actually the point I wanted to get across here on this one, is normally you'll see that one drop significantly after enabling lazy loading. However, on this site, Kyle loves his background images.
To be fair, when I built this site, there was no GenerateBlocks image block, and the default WordPress one sucks so bad that I just did them all as background images. But yes, but I had to defend myself.
I'm kind of glad though, because it gives us a great example here for this, and lots of people use background images. So what we're going to go do here is, there's 2 ways you can fix this on GeneratePress. I wanted to show one here. Close this here. GenerateBlocks fixed this in a recent update. If you go to edit a page, we're actually not going to do it this way, but I will show you what I would do if I was doing it. This is actually the easier way. Is we would go here. I would click on this background image. We go down to backgrounds. You can now use inline style, and this will load the image within the HTML of the page instead of CSS. And what that does is it now lets lazy loaders, whatever tool you're using for lazy loading, will now be able to grab that image and lazy load it properly. So if I was to go through these images and actually change how Kyle added them, change them all back to inline for the background images, then our lazy loader would automatically pick them up, and all of those would just be lazy loaded. So if I was building a site from scratch, I would always use that option for background images. And if you're using a different page builder, see if they have a way to add the background image in the HTML itself instead of CSS. If they don't, that's where we're going to go into this other option, which I will show you now. So we will go back to the site.
That option seems like it just came out in GenerateBlocks not that long ago.
It did. I'm so glad they added that. I think they had lots of tickets about that too, from lazy loaders not working, with images, which is a huge problem. And so I'm really glad that Tom and the team over there added that background image option. So here is where we have a field in lazy loading to do CSS background images. So you can, we added this recently too. What you can do is add background selectors in here, classes for these images. So, you know, not every theme or page builder might have a way to do it inline. So you might be stuck with CSS background images. In that case, you can go in here, look at, if you right click on an image, I'm using Chrome DevTools. You can Google it if you need to like figure out how to pull up Chrome DevTools and all this stuff. Right click on an image, inspect it. We can see that this has a class here. So like this GB container here. This does take a little CSS knowledge sometimes, but again, we're always happy to help with this stuff if you want to reach out. What I did on this page was I actually went through and I grabbed some of these container IDs already for these images. You can see here, I'm looking at the containers. You know, I have these unique container IDs. So I'm going to add them here. And then we'll go back here. And actually, let's put the cache here. Back to the front end of the site. We'll look at images. Now, I'm not going to move my mouse, otherwise we might start scrolling here and get some popping in. But you can see here immediately I have 5 images. We went down from 12 to 5. Now, that's because I just added the containers for those background images. Now, if I scroll down here, you can see as I go, them popping in from lazy loader. And this is or the style sheet there too. If I go super fast, it'll all probably come from lazy loader. But you can see my point here is that they are all technically lazy loaded. The reason they're coming from the style sheet is because we're actually lazy loading this whole container for that type of thing. Gotcha. But yeah, so we're down to just the images we want, pretty much those above the fold. We're good to go there. We're going to rerun PageSpeed Insights. Actually, I'm going to open up another one here.
When you were excluding images from lazy loading, when you said you could just put in the file name or whatever there, do you have to put in the full URL of the file or just the file name in Perfmatters?
It does URL matching, so just a part of the URL is completely fine. If you have multiple images, you can just do you don't even need to include the .jpeg. You can just do part of the file name. You can do the full URL. You can do the file name with .jpeg, .png. So anything will grab it.
Gotcha.
Now, if we look back again, you can see that point is 001 CLS came back, but I guess if we ran it again, we'd probably be done with that again too. So again, that one's a little trickier, but
splitting hairs.
Now, if I had more time to work on this, I could probably narrow down why that's coming. But again, I wouldn't worry about a 0.001 here right now. If we look at the LCP before, now look at the LCP now after doing the lazy loading images. So it went from a 2.8 to a 2. Huge difference. And again, we didn't just optimize that above the fold image. We actually optimized most of the images below. That's pretty much what we did. So when you see that thing about LCP and PageSpeed Insights, don't forget about like the other images in the page. That can also slow down your LCP. So the LCP is kind of a little misleading, sometimes warning in PageSpeed Insights. Use GTmetrix. They have great tooltips now in that for that. So let's see here. Now we're going to let's see here. We're going to delay JS. Now, this site doesn't have much JS on it because we're using GenerateBlocks. They don't have much JS to begin with. But there are a few JS files, and especially Kyle uses Fathom, which I actually use myself. Big kudos to them. I really like Fathom. But whenever you're loading third-party resources, that includes a DNS lookup again. Anytime you're doing third-party stuff, and the bad thing with that is, say Fathom servers are running slow one day. They're getting hammered for some reason. Now Kyle's site's loading with the request to Fathom. Because they're slow, his request is now super slow, and then that actually slows down Kyle's site. So that's why you have to be really careful with third-party requests when you can, because you start adding 5 third-party requests, one of those servers is going slow, then it's slowing down your site without requests. So it's, yeah. So what we're going to do here is delay this JavaScript to only load after we've interacted with the page, essentially.
I will say specifically on that Fathom one, they have it where they're blocking all the crawlers anyways. So you get dinged on like web.dev for that file being blocked, even though it's not really an issue. And delaying this JavaScript does take care of that as well.
And one thing I wanted to go through here was there are pros and cons to delaying JS. I know someone brought this up in your Facebook group. I did want to talk about this quickly here, is that sure, yes, there's pros and cons to delaying. Is it masking some of the underlying issue, especially on like Elementor sites? Yes, it is. It is masking some of the issue. However, I always recommend fixing the root of the problem first. However, that's not always possible. So to fix the root of the problem, I would use GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. You can see we're already scoring amazingly. We don't need to delay these really. We would be completely fine without doing any more work on this site. But that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. We live in a world with Elementor, with third-party plugins that are horribly coded. We live in sites where clients are using 100 plugins. Yes, I've seen 100 plugins on some client sites. And that's, you don't always have the chance to just say like, oh, let's just move you to GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. That's just not fathomable. I wish it was. Otherwise, well, our plugin wouldn't even exist if everybody was using GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. Let me see here. I just have some notes about this topic. I wanted to explain a little bit about JS. What it's actually doing is, what we're doing is we're moving the event timer for when those scripts fire. So on heavier sites, the essential scripts load right away, and then the other scripts fire on user interaction. So this way it doesn't interfere with the user experience. It kind of simultaneously creates a faster load time for the user. So it doesn't mask some of the underlying issue. Yes, it does. But it also just triggers specific JavaScript to fire after the page is already loaded. So I don't see anything wrong with that, in my opinion. And to be honest, there is no other way to fix this issue. There is no other way to fix 30 horribly coded JavaScript files. Your only option is to defer, which if you have 30, 40, 50 JavaScript files, defer is not going to cut it anymore. It might have been done back in the old days, but it won't cut it anymore. Delay is your only option to fix these issues. And with third-party scripts, you don't have any control over their code. So lots of third-party scripts will have cache warnings because they don't have caching headers on their sites, or they want it to reload right away. As Kyle said, he had another issue with WebDevTool because they're blocking something or not blocking something. And so there's just all things you can't control with third-party scripts. So sometimes delaying them will also fix those warnings as well. So we will go delay the JS now. So yes, good and bad. I love it and I hate it at the same time. But again, there's no better solution that exists. There's no way to fix bad JS other than moving to something that does fix it, like, or does it less, like GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. We'll do that.
I noticed you used to have under the delay timeout where we could pick a certain amount of time, and I've noticed that's on from there. So I guess you just figured out what's the best amount of time to delay it and just got rid of our options there.
Yeah, we started with the allowing you to choose the time. It now defaults to 10 seconds. So if nobody has interacted with the page for 10 seconds, it will now fire all the JS regardless. You can still add a filter. It's in our docs to go tweak the time. If you really want to like get it down, you can still go back and do that if you want. But we had lots of tickets of people setting it too short, and I won't get into the complicated reason, but it changes the event timer. And if it fires too soon, based on how heavy the site is, it will actually completely make the JS feature not work at all.
Gotcha.
So basically had huge Elementor sites trying to like fire it after a second, and it's not fathomable on that site. So it was not working at all. And then they were wondering why it wasn't delaying JS. So had to find a good happy medium. But yeah, if you want, you can go still tweak it if you really want to.
I'll just trust whatever you do. It's easier for me.
And 10 seconds is something we did pick from hundreds, thousands of tickets, and me work on our own sites. And it seems to be a good number to pick. So we'll go back, we cleared the cache. Let me check here. Oh, whoops. I actually put, so we have two options: specify the scripts you want to delay or delay all. We're actually going to use delay all here. So you have more tweaking if you really want to do that. Generate press, a delay all, I mean, pretty much works out of the box all the time. So
yeah, the only thing I noticed, and somebody had brought this up on a website I did recently, on the mobile version, you were having to click the little hamburger menu twice to get it to open up. And I think it might have been the delay on that was doing it.
We fixed that in the last update, actually.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that should be gone now. So now we see only the JS loading for lazy loading, which ours is excluded by default, and you need the lazy loading script to run. And then you can see I didn't touch anything and it loaded by itself, but after the 10 seconds. So, but yeah, super lightweight on the JS with the site, literally one JS file for generate press site. I interact with the page, the JS loads, we're good to go. But yeah, the mobile issue has been fixed. It was something that was very annoying actually for a while.
Well, to be fair, I wrote you about it and you fixed it in like 10 seconds anyway. So,
well, yeah, but it's something we knew about earlier too. And it's just been, yeah, it was, but yeah, I'm glad we've been able to fix that now. So let's go back to PageSpeed Insights. I'm not expecting much more from this site, to be honest.
Right.
We're already pretty good, but
we're pretty optimized at this point.
Yeah. How are you on time too? I'm fine with time.
I'm fine. I know. Look at that, 100. This might be perfect timing. I know we got a lot of folks in here that are really excited about seeing the Elementor side of things. So I don't want to cut us off from that.
Yeah, no, and I'm good for time. So yeah, we're really good here. Let's do the quick example here. I'm going to bring this up because this is actually a really good example that people will be wanting to know. And then we'll dive into the Elementor side. Oops. So we have a slider here. Not a good look here, right? Delay JS all is on, and the slider doesn't load right away. This is a good example of somewhere where you would want to exclude something. Now there it loaded after 10 seconds, but if it was me, I want that to load right away. I don't care what the performance impact is. That's a usability problem. So what we're going to go do is you're going to need some JS exclusions for that. That uses JS. Also, if you're wondering what I'm using, Smart Slider does not use jQuery. It's one of the best sliders you can use, in my opinion. Lots of sliders have jQuery dependencies, which is just really slow. Smart Slider got rid of their jQuery dependency. I think it was last year. They only use vanilla JavaScript. So if you need a slider that's third party, I think Elementor has their own thing, but if you need a third party slider, Smart Slider, I can't believe I'm actually recommending a slider. But if you need one, because I'm not a fan of them, but if you need one, Smart Slider is actually good.
Well, Amber Hines was watching a minute ago, and she's my go-to for accessibility stuff. So I'd love to know what she says about Smart Slider and accessibility, because that's, part of the picture is sliders and performance, and the other part is sliders and accessibility. So I just try to avoid them completely because they're a nightmare for both of those things.
Yeah. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, you can see here, it has some scripts loading. So what I'm going to do to save time, instead of adding each individual, we can see the folder here, Smart Slider 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our JS. I'm going to add Smart Slider 3 right in there. This is just a path, just like lazy loading. You can do a path here. Saves you time from having to copy paste all these things. For most exclusions, you're going to need to, with a slider, you can pretty much assume that all their JS just needs to load right away. There's no picking certain ones. It's just, you're going to just have to load them. Now we add that. And then I'm going to show you that we're actually going to, it's not going to work. So see here, we just have those exclusions, not going to work. However, the problem with that is if it doesn't work, it probably means there's some inline JavaScript. So you have to think, this is sometimes gets worse. And if we get too complicated, I'm sorry, but some of this is complicated and there's no other way to fix some of this stuff. So just try to learn it as you go, and we'll have this in the show notes too, and you can rewatch it too. But so for this, I know it's not working because there's something else loading. I've excluded the JS. So what else is there? So I'm going to go straight to the source code. Now for this, I'm going to show you how I would do it on a site. Actually, let me tweak this so I can see it all line wrap here. What I would do is I would go Control-C, Control-F or something and look for our PM delayed script tag. This is going to be on any JavaScript that is delayed. So I would go through and, there's probably going to be a couple here, depending on how many JS you have. Go through, and what I would do is look for any that I'm jumping to something else because I know what I'm going for, but let me see here. How I would find this is I would look through each PM delayed script one. I would look for anything that also has smart slider in it. So that pretty much all the plugins name their scripts, they're with their names in them. So it's pretty easy to find them once you get down to it. So here, right here, I can see smart slider. It's in our script tag thing that's delayed. So what I'm going to do is all you need is a portion of this tag here. Doesn't matter what it is. Find a unique thing. I'm going to actually use the dot, this little thing here, N2. Doesn't matter what you pick. I could choose something else. I could do N2.smartSlider simple. I could do, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use underscore N2. Just pick something that's unique to them though. You don't want to pick like .wp or. So I'm going to add underscore N2 in there. I'm going to go back and test to see what happens. And again, some of this is just sometimes you have to trial and test. You can see now it loads right away. So I excluded the JS for it, and there was that one little piece of inline JS. Now, not everything has inline JS, but again, some of this you just have to go back and forth and test too. And you can always reach out to us if you have trouble with it.
Yeah, that's a good example because I wouldn't have known to go in there and find all that. I probably would have given up at that point or messaged you. So
now,
good to know.
Sometimes too, you will see a console error warning in here, but in this case, we didn't have one. So I'm going to show one in Elementor later here of a console warning where we actually do use a console to track something down like that. Okay,
I'm sure we'll have plenty of warnings.
Oh, one last thing here. And then we'll die. The Elementor site is actually going to be quicker, ironically. I'm using some of these examples just on this site because I did it first. So instead of on Elementor.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we don't have to rehash all the things you already talked about when we do it a second time.
Yeah, all these, like, I'm just going to be toggling things on at that point. We'll be going through straight. I'm going to use a more complicated example. So hopefully some people will appreciate this. It is with the script manager, unused CSS, delay.js, and Ninja Forms. All four of those things combined and intertwined into one problem. This is something I have on my site. I use Ninja Forms on my site. I've used it for years. There's new forms plugins that have come out. I probably would move to a different one if I had my choice now. But again, we actually have coded workflows into Ninja Forms that we can't really switch easily right now at the moment. So Ninja Forms has a dependency on dash icons, which is a problem. I do not like that either. So I have a Ninja Forms thing here. We can see here, there's a couple problems here. First off, our form's not loading right away. See that? Second, we're losing all these styles. This should not look like this. It should look like when we're logged in. It should look pretty like this. Does not look like that. So one thing is dash icons needs to be enabled for Ninja Forms. Now, the way I know that is just some trial and error. Unfortunately, sometimes it is just trial and error. But the problem is we actually disable dash icons everywhere completely. We cannot do that. because we need it to load on that one page, unfortunately. However, this is where our script manager now comes into play. So we're going to turn this off. We're going to enable dash icons again, which is a huge library. So you want to turn this off. It is very huge. What we're going to do is we're going to go under our script manager. We'll turn this on here under assets. And we're going to go to the contact page. We're going to go up to the script manager here in the toolbar. We're going to go down to dash icons. Now, I actually had this already set. I didn't reset the script manager beforehand. And so we're going to turn dash icons off. Actually, let me uncheck these just so you can see it. We're going to off. I want it to be off everywhere except for the current URL, which we are on the contact page at the moment. And then I want it to still work logged in. So we will add an exception for logged in. The logged in stuff for a lot of things this is more optional, but we're going to just have the logged in for dash icons on. We're going to save that. Oh, no, disable. Whoops. I might have actually logged in.
If you haven't used Perfmatters yet, the script manager is the hidden gem of this entire thing. The amount of things you can do inside of here when you need to, it's pretty amazing.
Well, and this is really where I come to when I need to do these other things. Like there would be no way to solve this. I need dash icons running on one page, but I don't want to load it on my whole site. How do I fix that? It's not really many ways to fix that other than doing something like this. And this is where it comes in really handy. And when you're working with tons of sites, you'll get lots of little instances like this over time where you need to just do this one little slightly different way. And so that's what we're doing in this instance. So
I've even done that. You mentioned the Google Maps thing before. I've done the same thing for Google Maps where I did want to have the real map on the contact page or whatever. So I did exactly what you've done here with dash icons and just disabled it everywhere except the one page where I needed it. So,
yep. So yeah, that's where this can come in really handy. I usually do the other optimizations first and then come back and use the script manager. Unless you're really wanting to go hardcore into the optimizations, you could start with the script manager. But again, some people don't have much time, so you can do it either way. So we have dash icons loading. Now, if we go back, clear the cache, boom, here. Okay, so now we look at the styles. Looks a little better now. Dash icons loading. We don't have that crazy empty box with the captcha thingy. Looks better, but it's still not loading on delay. And you could leave this, but in my opinion, it looks kind of sloppy. So
yeah.
What we will do is we're going to use this as an example. So let's see here. We'll go see what. So we can see here 2 Ninja Forms scripts loading. So what you would naturally do is like, okay, well, I want it to load right away. Let's go add the scripts for Ninja Forms here. That would be your first assumption. So whoops. Sure. And actually, I could have just probably done the Ninja Dash Forms to grab the folder. Probably would have been better. So we'll add that. We'll go back to the contact page here. Now you'll see it still isn't loading. And the reason is we added those 2 scripts. However, jQuery is not defined. And this is where you can use the console to get some of those like, what else is on here? So in this instance, we obviously need jQuery loading. So we're going to go back. We're going to the jQuery. We're gonna have that, and you can see it's still not working. Remember, with JavaScript, you get warnings. Think of, I forget the name of that block, the stack block game where you take blocks out and it collapses.
Jenga.
JavaScript's like Jenga. If you mess with the order of delay and like take one out of the middle and the other ones have dependencies needing those, if you mess with the order, it's like Jenga and it all goes to crap, basically. So we added jQuery, but now it has a dependency for another file. I'm not going to go through a crazy amount of this to save time, but basically we work our way through Backbone. So like we had to add the Backbone file. Then we had to add the underscore file. And then we had to add 2 inline JavaScript pieces for Ninja Forms. So not great. And the problem with this is now, I don't want jQuery loading on the whole site. And I don't, that's just not a good idea. jQuery is the heaviest piece of JavaScript you have been loading. So what we're actually going to do in this instance is I would actually not load them here. So I'm going to take that back out and I will show you what I do in this instance is you have 2 options. We go edit the page. And we have our optimizations here. We could turn delay.js off completely on the contact page. That would fix the whole problem. Now, again, it kind of depends on what page you have, because like, does the contact page really need to be 100 on PageSpeed? Right. It's not as important as homepage and lead landing pages and other things that are actually generating. So, or indexed in SERPs as much. So that's the one option. You could just turn it off and be like, okay, I fixed it on this page and move on. Good to go. In this instance, I'm going to actually show you what I would do because I'm OCD and I still want to run it on the content page. So we're going to actually add a filter to only have those exclusions for delay running on just the contact page, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So we will go add a snippet here. We use code snippets. Highly recommend the plugin. I think Kyle, you use it too. Great plugin. I've used it for like 5-6 years, ever since it came out. It's awesome. Great for adding custom PHP. We have all these filter examples on our site on the Novashare docs if you need them. But what we're doing here is we can see we're adding a filter. Again, if you need to write these, reach out to us, or we have examples you can already copy paste. The page ID for this page, 275, they show up in the browser bar. So we're saying if it is this page, that page ID, we want our exclusion with our filter to run just on this page. So we're going to activate this filter that I already have in here. We're going to, let me just make sure it's toggled on now. Yep. I have not disabled it here. So delay.js is still running on this page. And now if we load it, we can see without me interacting with the page, it loads right away. So you can see you can really get fine tuning with this stuff, with filters and stuff. You can turn it delay off on just one page. There's lots of ways you can fix something, but I
think this highlights an interesting point too, and something that I've tried to really fix in my agency is the more and more you can pick a stack of tools and then stick with it on all your builds, the easier life becomes. Because let's say if you use Ninja Forms, you're probably using it on all your builds. You know that this is an issue, right? So you can bake this kind of PHP snippet and all that into your starter site and use it on every site. And it's not like you have to go to these extreme lengths every project you build. You would already have this library of things you need with these specific plugins. So it is so handy just to have like, your core stack of tools you use and learn how to optimize that perfectly instead of always grabbing new tools and adding new things to the system.
Yeah, exactly. And we're always adding new filters to do, for these, like for this instance, it came in really handy. So we have filters for all these different like one-off cases that you come across, and we're always finding new ones because WordPress always changes. So
if somebody does have a problem like this, this is something you can help out with via support if they're a Perfmatters customer.
Yep. And just go to our contact us page. And send us an email, and we always respond within 24 hours. And yeah, we'll get back to you right away.
Fantastic.
So let's jump, I think here. Oh, one last thing here, and then we'll jump to this could be on either side too, so it won't be applicable, is we might be able to get that largest contentful paint down sometimes by preloading. You know how Google was complaining about this big image here,
right?
With LCP, even though we optimized the rest of the images and it did drop our LCP, we could still see if we could speed up that one big image, like try to get it loading any faster than we can in the load order. So what we could do is go here. We're going to actually take that specific image there, and we're going to select it as an image. We're going to preload it. What preloading does here is it moves it to the top of the waterfall. It tells Google, I want this to load before anything else. That's what preloading does. And that can speed up LCP. So we will save changes. We will go breeze, we'll purge cache here. And we'll run this again. Now, this is such a subtle thing, and this site is so optimized already, I don't know if we're going to see it drop the LCP in this instance, but normally it is a good practice to try to preload some of those hero images at the top. So.
Yeah, and that's especially useful. You know, a lot of times I'll do like in GenerateBlocks, I'll do and look, it did. I'll do like a page hero that is the same on a bunch of different pages. Well, then you only have like one image in that hero, you know, that's used on a bunch of pages. So fixing something like this would be pretty quick.
Yeah, and it actually did drop it quite a bit. So now if we look at desktop, I would actually get the LCP. We'll have to wait on that because that's probably something else. But yeah, I think we're good on this site. And any little LCP issues, like you can reach out to us too. We can hunt things down. Sometimes it just takes 10 minutes to hunt something down like that.
10 minutes for you, 2 hours for us.
And I will say this too, we have seen this a lot lately actually, and it's becoming a problem, is if you have LCP issues, turn off all your optimization plugins temporarily and see if you still have the LCP or CLS. Sorry, I was saying LCP. If you still have CLS, that means it's coming from your theme, and you should not have CLS coming from a theme. If you do, you need to reach out to the theme developers. GeneratePress should not have any CLS from the get-go, blank. But I have seen, I don't want to name drop any other page builders here. Elementor is actually pretty good about this, but there's some other page builders that I have seen that have some crazy CLS out of the box, and I don't know what they're doing, but then people reach out to us to fix the CLS or think it's coming from our plugin, and it's actually just coming from the page builder. And whether it's a bug and something they need to fix, it's just optimization plugins aren't meant to fix CLS. The base theme should have 0 CLS out of the box if it's coded properly.
Right. And I think some of the issues actually on this here, when you switch to desktop, there's some things. I think the way I did the little decorations around that image with an after pseudo element, and I wrote CSS to make all the little boxes and stuff. I think that's part of the problem, is just my hacky way of making all that work.
Probably. And what we could do if I had more time is I'll just show you where I would do it, is you would you'd probably find that pseudo element and add it as a excluded selector here for CSS. This is probably CSS, and it's getting picked up by unused CSS. That's probably what's happening.
Gotcha.
And so you'd add it there. And we have one CSS example in the Elementor one, so I'll go into that.
Perfect.
So we're good there. And then let's just run. Whoops. Let's just run this one more time. Are you going time, Kyle? I'm completely fine. I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
I got still a little over an hour before I get bombarded with children coming home from school.
Okay.
I don't think that will help the live stream. They're not really into website optimization very much.
So here we go. 100. Again, we could probably fix out even to the little CLS if we had a little more time here. Waterfall, and yep. So we're good to go.
12 total requests still blows my mind because I think about when I first started building websites with Elementor and didn't know what I was doing. Like I know a lot of the sites I was building had over 100 requests. It's just like, man, that is a big difference.
Yep. And we can see too that total load time on this site, this GeneratePress site, is 452 milliseconds. So that's pretty darn fast.
Yeah, you're not going to get any complaints about that, I don't think.
And I will say too, I have a load time test before, and the before was 786 milliseconds. So you can see how fast GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks is just out of the box. Like it's still loading under a second without even touching it yet. So kudos to them and their code.
Yes, kudos to Tom.
Yep. But you can see that Perfmatters did come in handy if you want to like take it all the way that you can possibly can. So what we'll go to is Elementor site now.
All right, well, you get all that set up. I'm going to double check in the chat here and see if we had anything for everybody that was waiting for Elementor stuff. We are jumping into that now. I know we did have some really specific questions on, what if I'm using this plugin or that plugin? I'll try to pull all those and see if there's any answers we can get later on afterwards. But I did mention here in the chat that it's such a case-by-case basis. I know some people were looking to see if cadence blocks would allow you to load the background images inline and stuff. And it looks like they found out that you can't do that. They're going to reach out to them about that. But there are just so many case-by-case bases,
Yeah, and kind of what GeneratePress or GenerateBlocks did too was you couldn't like a month ago either with GenerateBlocks.
Right.
And you had to add the div IDs like I showed there in the example.
Right.
Just now you can change it. So I think they're just now catching up. I'm sure like cadence blocks, if they don't have the option, they'll probably get people bombarding them with requests and they'll finally probably add that option as well. So,
right.
But you can add the classes. You should be able to. I've worked with lots of cadence clients and so has my brother. And we've done the CSS background stuff before. So I know that works.
Yeah.
It takes a little time.
Yeah, you have the option. You can do it now, but I'm sure if y'all reach out to them, it seems like Cadence is really good about implementing things. So I would say if you're watching this, excuse me, and wanting that to be an option, I would send their support a little request. And if they get a few of those, they'll probably prioritize it. We did have a couple of people say on here, I forgot, I think Diana said a minute ago, she's been watching this and working on her site at the same time. She got it from a 54 to a 99 on desktop. We had somebody else in here. Margaret said she just got a 99 on a WooCommerce Elementor site. So that's fantastic news. People are already making huge improvements.
That is awesome to hear. Okay, cool. So we'll jump into the Elementor site now. I just have a speed test stock with Perfmatters, nothing running yet. We can see mobile 52, not great. That's definitely not what you'd probably want to hand a client if they, lots of clients these days tend to run this tool too, I've noticed. And then they come back to the agency to fix it, basically say you need to fix this.
And I'd say that's pretty typical of all the Elementor sites I have, those scores.
Yeah. And if you have tons of animations and sliders with animations, and I mean, I've seen Elementor sites loading in the 20s to 30s, like starting out. I mean, it really depends on how much stuff you have on there, how many things you're using, how many plugins. So it can range quite a bit. So we will start on the site now. What we're going to go do is...
I'll add in here that Mary just posted that she's been watching along too. She just got a 99 on mobile. It was around 70. So fantastic that people are making some good improvements already.
So we will just enable these quick toggles. And again, these are typically the ones I like to do. I will tweak some of these other options, but we don't need to for performance right now. Okay, and on this site, actually, the first thing we're going to do is you can see Kyle has some whopping big images on here. He probably hasn't optimized these yet. Again, this is the same site, or maybe he has, and this is a good example then to use. So images this big are definitely a problem, but sometimes if they're lazy loaded and they're that big, they aren't as big of an issue because they're not going to load until after the page loads. However, I would still recommend compressing those, but what we're going to do is fix this first because it's just hurting everything here. So we're going to go lazy loading. And again, I will do my usual default. I'll pick 2 usually. I want to turn these on just because I usually do. And let me pull this site up. Hopefully the cache didn't clear where it's up yet. We will look at the images here.
If you would, while you have the front of that site pulled up, if you would minimize DevTools for a second. People are asking if they could just see what that website looks like before you jump into all this, just so they can get familiar with it.
Sorry about that. I did not
No problem.
show the site first. Here's the site. Beautiful site in my opinion. I look at Kyle's sites and I just hate myself. I'm a horrible designer.
You're silly.
This is a beautiful looking site in my opinion. Using Elementor, yeah, just butter smooth. So hopefully that will help people see what we're working with.
Thank you.
And there is quite a bit going on, I will say, for the site. Like it's not, I mean, it is quite a bit of scrolling here, so it's not just a
and there's a little there's a blog loop inside there, a little bit down there. There's showing 3 blog posts, and then that where the locations are, that's another post loop showing location post types. And then you have a slider there that's showing a bunch of testimonials. So there are a lot more things going on with this page for sure, especially in comparison to the one we just looked at.
Yeah. And we will see that here shortly.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
Why that works, all of the JS that is required for that to run. But we'll go back here. I'm actually going to switch this to mobile view, actually, just instead of desktop on this one. So out of the box, we can see, we're trying to fix lazy loading. We can see 10 images loading out of the box. Now on this site, Elementor does not have a way to inline the background images. So just like Cadence. So we're going to show an example here of what I would do if I was using Cadence. So we have to, and the other issue here, there's 2 problems. There's no inline option. And if I was to go look at the classes here for these, Elementor does not use unique classes on the image blocks it has, which is very annoying. What that means is if I was to go add that class into the CSS box in Perfmatters, it would grab all of them, if that makes sense.
Right.
There's nothing unique. So if I lazy loaded these background images here, it's also going to catch this background images up, this big one here, which I do not want. We don't want to lazy load this hero image. So that's a problem. However, we have a way to do that with Elementor. So we will go edit the page here. And bear with me, I do not use Elementor in the editor portion a lot. I know how to optimize Elementor, but I do not use the editor that much. So let's say I want to find one of these background images here. Let's click. Actually, what I was looking for. See this big blob up over here, this background image? Yeah. I'm just trying to find any one of them here.
And those ones will be easier than those post loops down there because they're actually using a third-party tool to do all that. So you'd have to jump in there somewhere else.
Let's see here, background.
Are you looking for the additional CSS?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, so yeah, there you are.
Took me a little while. I'm sure people use Elementor quicker than me at this part. But what you can do is we have a class and it's in our docs. You can add this Perfmatters. Let me just put this. I'm just putting this so you can see it bigger. I'm taking this, but Perfmatters lazy CSS BG class. So what you would do is you go through your Elementor. You kind of assume that if you're using Perfmatters already, as you build this Elementor site, you're doing this as you go. It's probably quicker. Like you add a background image, you would add this class on the background image and kind of go as you go. And if you did that on each one of them, which I've actually already done in preparation for this. So we'll go back now. and we will enable the CSS background images. Now, I don't have to put anything in here because we went with the class route. All I have to do is enable that, saying I want to lazy load the CSS background images. So we'll do that. We will go back to, we are using Rocket on the site, just for warning, WP Rocket instead of Breeze. So we'll clear the cache. We're gonna go back. We had 10 images before, remember? So we're gonna scroll to the top. And you can see now we have 4 images on mobile instead of 10 images. So, and pretty much I would say just like Kyle's GenerateBlocks site, which he hadn't actually changed in the new inline yet, but this one used primarily background images as well. So there should be a way to pretty much with any page builder or theme to always get the background images now lazy loaded at least, which is really important. And you can see as we scroll down, let's see, some of those massive images like this one that should be more optimized, the 303 kilobyte one, is not actually on the first load. So it's not going to really ding us as much.
Right.
So if you didn't lazy load the background images, you would be hurting here with the defer stuff. So we cleared the cache. Let's run this again. I will open up do this here.
And so essentially you got 3 different ways you can do that if you're using background images. One being if you're using GenerateBlocks and you have a toggle for it, go ahead and do that. Second, if each one of those has a unique class already, you could just put those into the settings in Perfmatters. Third case scenario, you can add Perfmatters little class that he just showed you onto that element and take care of it that way.
So yeah, 3 different ways, and we haven't really come across any other scenarios, so that should work in almost anyone. It's just some are harder than others. Some might take a little longer to do. So we're still around the same score, but again, let's see if there's any differences here. I would actually say it's a little worse, but I would say this is probably a variance of just the score testing, but we will get it better. So don't worry about that. The goal is the end. So what we wanted to fix was that defer warning. So that's what Google was complaining about. So see here, defer, and also these next gen formats. Google really likes WebP images, but if you optimize and compress them a lot, this warning will also go away. So technically you don't always have to use WebP. Another thing that people might not realize. But again, it cleared up both of these warnings, so we're good there now. So let's go on to the next thing. Oh yeah, so we are going to go here. We're going to defer JS.
They were asking here in the chat about if there's any reason to use WP Rocket with Perfmatters. I was just explaining that Perfmatters doesn't do any of the caching, so you still need some kind of caching solution. On the other site, we used Breeze, which Brian mentioned earlier, because I'm using Cloudways and that's their native caching solution. We use that. On this site, it's also on Cloudways, but we were having some problems with the Breeze plugin. And I already had WP Rocket on here.
I think it was a file permission issue with the staging site when it got copied over. So it's like a specific thing that we just didn't want to spend time fixing. Otherwise,
and we just figured it would be good to show 2 different setups anyway. So the other one was with Breeze, this one's with WP Rocket caching. So
and we do have lots of clients that use Rocket with Perfmatters. Obviously keep the same features off. So if you're using lazy load in one, keep it off in the other one. Sometimes we might have a few more options, I think, than Rocket for like how to tweak lazy loading as far as like, excluding leading images, some of this stuff down here. So it really depends on what you're needing. But we have clients using both just fine. We even have fixes in our site just for Rocket. Like we want our plugin to work with them. So, and again, you always need a cache plugin unless you have server level cache like Kinsta or like WP Engine or stuff like that, where you might not need to actually cache and plugin. Like if you're at Kinsta, like we are, we don't even have we just use Perfmatters and Kinsta. That's literally all we have for our optimization. So.
We did have several people asking about light speed in here too.
We have tons of clients using Lightspeed. Works fine. I like Lightspeed. I mean, again, you just don't want to turn on any of the same features. So like lazy loading,
you don't want to double up any of the settings.
double up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 3 CDNs isn't better than 1 CDN.
Right.
Three lazy loaders isn't better than 1 lazy loader. And if you do that, you will run into issues. So, but it's most of these plugins, it's easy to toggle things on and off. So what we're going to do is now defer JavaScript. I also will point out, you can always run defer and delay together. Delay debunks, is that the right word? It overtakes or takes precedence over defer. So you can always run these both. It's always good to have defer on, but if you're running delay, like delay all, defer won't actually even be doing anything. But I always leave defer on, because if you start adding exclusions with delay, then they will be deferred, which can still help. So like, that's why I would always recommend using both too. We will go look now. I just toggled on delay. Now on this site, or defer, sorry. On this site, we have don't worry about this admin bar one. That's a logged in one, but we see this WP is not defined console warning. This is coming from defer. So you just toggle this back off really quick. Toggle this on. No console warnings. Other than you can avoid those violations and other Chrome things. But so what we would do here is, I just wanted to show an example of like toggling things on and seeing a console warning. This one is complicated. I just want to show you that how crazy some of this stuff can get. And you don't always need to worry about it, but WP is not defined. So if I click into this, we can jump into, this is where it's erroring out. WP.18, like most people will be like, what the heck is this? But we can see it's from a WP dot thing. Now, if I go search the source code and look for WP dot, oops, I see that one there, but I don't see anything else as far as a file referencing WP dot. This one just comes from troubleshooting and knowing how defer works and stuff like that. But like for this one, it's coming from hooks, unfortunately. There's a dot, whoops, yeah, dot WP right down here. And because we're deferring on this site, this Elementor site, it's now warning us that this other has a dependency with this WP dot here in the hooks file. Again, I know this might be going over some people's heads, and you don't need to worry about some of this, but what you could do then is start tracing down these dependencies, and you would add like hooks in there and all sorts of things. But in this instance, we're not going to really worry about it because we're going to do delay.js later anyways. And so that defer warning will go away. So in this instance, you don't always need to worry about console warnings from defer. I would say they're more important for delay, but not defer.
Gotcha. If you're going to use delay, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And to be honest, I would say 95% of the times I don't see issues with defer. So I usually just flip it on and do my thing. I usually don't worry about anything.
Gotcha.
So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to toggle on unused CSS again. We will use file and delay. And clear the cache. Go back to the home site. Now on this site, we will notice there's 25 scripts here after I move my mouse, after delay kicked in, 25 CSS files on this site.
It's not enough, Brian. We need more.
We need more. But you can see, like, just going from GeneratePress, you're talking 3, 4 files. You go to Elementor, you're talking 25. So you can see just the amount of difference there is. But it doesn't mean you can't get great scores with Elementor. I know people are going to harsh me on, or people always bang me on social and Twitter for that one, but
oh well. I think the evidence is clear here, Brian.
let's see. So I wanted to point out here though, see how we have more than just a couple files here. See how we have these post CSS files from Elementor.
Right.
The thing is, these are used for the individual template, like layers that you make for Elementor sections. And these are actually dynamic, meaning they change. Like if I was to go to the About Us page, you're going to have more of those files, but they'll have different IDs because you have different like templates probably being used for the About Us page.
Gotcha.
For unused CSS, those will probably not be triggering in unused CSS because that code is used on this page. That's why Elementor is generating it here. So it's not going to cause like an unused CSS warning, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It is used. So there's no reason to really clean it up. So we exclude the uploads Elementor folder by default for those post ones.
These are all
And then,
fairly small files anyways. I mean, obviously the more you
yeah,
can get rid of,
yeah.
the better, but.
And then everything else you can see is cleaned up below here. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to point out those exclusions there. And over time, we add more like exclusions that we see like with different page builders that like, they might have another dynamic thing like Cadence and Divi. They each have kind of their own dynamic kind of systems that we try to add exclusions to the core of Perfmatters if it's necessary to make things easier, if it's always needed. So let's see here. What we'll go do now is we will run another test.
I'm sure once we get to the Google fonts, that's going to make us a big difference like it did on the last one too.
Google Fonts, actually, I will say this for Elementor, they load Google Fonts better already from the get-go.
Really?
Yeah. They've just taken the chance to add display swap nonstop. Now, GeneratePress actually gives you the option. And people tweak it and then don't have it on. And then Elementor actually just has that on. And I think you do have the option to maybe turn it off, but they actually took a good approach on that one. I probably, because so many people use it and see that warning, that it was just better, you know, to like just turn this on. So you can see we actually don't have the font warnings here at all for like leverage text display warnings. So let's go back. So we jumped from a 52 to a 69, and you can see that quite a few other things went down. We dropped the total blocking time, LCP, getting to a better place here. And I will say here, notice here, we do have a 0.001 CLS. This is my before one. So this is coming from something that's not Perfmatters probably. So I just want to point that out before we've even done anything with the fonts. So, but again, if it was me too, I might not even honestly worry about a 0.001. It really depends. You'd have to really go track that down, see what that's coming from with this. Because see this 0000, that's not very helpful.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from? So you'd really have to go tweak it more. And I mean, we can't help with that if you have issues, but it would take us diving in more and maybe a little help from my brother on that one.
Yeah.
Really dig into it.
And I just imagine most reasonable people are not too bothered by 0.001.
We do have some clients I would bother, but you get the whole ramification too. And so if I was an agency building clients sites and just trying to score good so I can get to the next client, like that probably would not bother me.
Right.
So it really depends on how OCD you are. So let's jump to the next thing here. Oh, and I will just point this out. This was the before. You can see unused CSS files. After, there's no warning for unused CSS. Now, we have a unused CSS exclusion that I wanted to show here. So on this site, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this here. Logged out. I will go to this blog post that Kyle has. Let me regenerate this here. Oh, I know, I just messed it up actually. That's why. So remember when I said earlier, post used CSS is shared. So when I went to this blog post the first time, the used CSS for all your blog posts is generated just once. So now if I go to your other blog post here, it's using the same CSS.
Right.
Because all this stuff at the top, none of this CSS changes. All your templates, that all uses the same stuff. All of this is nothing changes. So that's why we generate it once. The problem was I added a unique thing on this one. And when I went here, it generated it for this, and I needed to go to the other post first. So let me go here. I'm going to clear my UCSS. I'm going to clear the cache here. Close this. And then I'm going to go to that second post first, because I want it to, and again, you don't have to think through this really. I'm doing this on purpose just as an example, but I'm going to this post first because I want it to generate the brand new UCSS for this post.
Yeah, based off of this post.
Yeah, based off of this one. We can see post of UCSS is loaded. So we're going to go back to that other post. And see, there we go. Still a little cache in my own local browser. See how this is broken to crap here? If I would scroll, it fixes itself, see? But I don't like that. That's it looks bad. Whoops. I think I'm still locally cached here. Let me pull this up so my own browser's not caching itself. Probably need to close Chrome. Sometimes well, you saw what I was talking about, right? The breakage there. You would see that again if I close probably Chrome incognito and bring it back up and then go back. So what we're going to do is we would actually, let me see if I can, there we go. What I'm going to do here is track down. So basically what we need to do is I want to fix that. I want it to load right away. I want that CSS to be there, even though I've already generated it. So I'm going to go in here and look at the CSS here for this block and kind of see, I'm going to go to the root of it, basically, all the way to the top here. And we'll look here. And I can see here that it's using the figure block gallery classes here. So I'm going to add these. And again, some of this, might take some trial and error. And if you need help, reach out to us. I've been doing this for a while, so I kind of know you can spot the classes quicker. But what we're going to do is add these selectors. So figure block gallery, they were added from right here, figure dot block gallery right there. We're going to save. We'll clear the UCSS and then we'll clear the cache here. And I'm going to close this post, copy this to my clipboard. We're going to go back to the first post that does not have that in it because we want to generate the UCSS. So we've just make sure it's there. Yep, we're there. So now we're going to go back to the second post. Oh, whoops.
That's the first one again.
There we go. And now let me just refresh a couple times here to make sure. So I'm reloading over and over here. You can see that every single time it fixes itself after so
yeah, I can see where all those exclusions come in handy, even if obviously anytime you can create templates for things, that saves on not having to do completely new CSS and everything for each single post or page. But when you have exceptions like this, at least there's a way to get in there and find those and get them running.
Page is generated per page. So you probably won't need many exclusions or at all on pages because it's generated per page. Now for posts is where we keep adding things like core, like say you use a column, a block column, in Gutenberg, and you use it in one and not the other. We're adding exclusions like that in the back end so you don't even see it. Of the like the CSS for a block column is just there excluded without you.
Right. By default.
So that these don't happen as much. But again, some of these, when there's 1,000 plugins out there, you could be adding anything uniquely to this post and we don't know. But again, for performance, we only generate it once per blog post because 99% of the time, you won't have any issues and it's way better for performance. So let's see here.
While you pull up the next thing, Luis just posted here in the comments that she just tweaked her Perfmatters settings with lazy loading images, excluding the leading images and adding the missing image dimensions. And she went from 61 on mobile to 90 on mobile just with those tweaks. So that's pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. Great. And always check the background images to make sure if you see any background images loading, always try to get those lazy loaded.
Yeah, with all this, it's important to open an incognito window with yourself logged out and go make sure everything's looking right on the front end. Because I've made that mistake too of just looking on the front end while I'm logged in and not seeing what's going on the site.
Yep. So now we're going to go toggle fonts on. So let's see what's happening here. Fonts. So you can see in Elementor, they are loading Google fonts, but you'll notice that we didn't have that Google font warning. It's because they're already using swap essentially. However, we still want to load them locally, both for speed and, like you said earlier, for privacy reasons. So we still want to move them local, even though we don't have any warnings. So we're going to go add. You technically don't need display swap because we just grab it from them already, but you can add those again. We will save the changes. We'll go back, refresh our site. We'll look at the fonts now. You can see both fonts are now loaded locally from Perfmatters. And what we will do is, to be safe, we're probably going to go preload these. That's just kind of a standard thing. And again, I think we're going to add an option for this because I keep doing this over and over. And like, well, maybe we should just add this.
I mean, is there going to be a scenario where you don't want to preload the fonts that you load locally?
I can tell you why we didn't add it to begin with, is because I've seen some sites, and I'm not kidding, some sites have 65 Google fonts. And 65. And sometimes that's an issue, something causing a problem, causing that many to load. But if you were to preload that many fonts, it just causes other problems. So, however, if we have a toggle to toggle on preload, I think that's the best of both worlds. Say, you won't cause any issues, but you can at least don't have to grab the URLs anymore.
You need just a warning if somebody's loading 65 Google fonts, just a big warning that comes up that says, stop what you're doing.
Fix this first before doing anything. So I'm just going to add those again. And
it's a good question in here too, asking about if there are any options if people are using typekit fonts instead of Google fonts.
I actually have that in our Perfmatters doc on our site. You can go see the typekit fix. They actually have a display swap option in the kit itself. So you have to like go to Adobe Fonts or whatever, go to the kit and toggle on, it's off by default, toggle on display swap, and that will do the same thing. You can't move them locally though. There is no fix for moving typekit locally. However, you can fix the leverage, CSS swap warning that you get.
I'll find that doc while we're talking here and put it in here.
And you could preload them technically too. You can preload anything in Perfmatters. So, but yeah, you can enable swap with typekit. One other instance I wanted to show here, we added the preload. Here's our old order of things. So we can see the fonts. Where are the fonts here? I can find them. The fonts are like scattered. See way down here?
Right.
So if we reload now, after I've preloaded them, we can see the fonts are now at the top of the waterfall. And that again is what preload is, what it does. Oh, another warning I wanted to show you. Maybe I'll turn that off and actually show you. Actually, I'm going to just drag this over be quicker without having them to clear the cache, is see this warning right here. You've probably seen it before. If you've worked with Elementor, you get the same web font error warning with E icons from Elementor. We don't have a way to fix that because we actually don't need to. Elementor has a way to fix it themselves. That's why we haven't done anything. If you go into settings, experiments, and inline font icons in Elementor, that will fix the render issues with Font Awesome and the E icons library. So if you're getting that warning with E icons or Font Awesome from Elementor, they have a way to fix it already. Cool. So now we're going to go to delay.js. And I will point out, or actually, let's go look at, where's my speed test here? Now you can see here, I want to point this out to you. Elementor, not bad desktop. But again, remember this is desktop, not mobile. Remember when you're working with GTmetrix, desktop. You have to have the paid version to do the mobile, which I actually do have the paid version, but the mobile is not very useful. It doesn't show half of the suggestions. So I use it just because I run out of tests.
So when are we going to expect the Brian Jackson testing tool? I mean, so we can combine all the best things from all these different platforms.
If you need an alternative for mobile, I would probably recommend WebPageTest actually for free. But yeah, we're not doing anything with a testing tool, man. That's got to be a whole nother nightmare of server loads and API calls. And a whole different ballgame. The one thing I wanted to point out here before we turn this on, look how many JS files we have. We have 30 JS files. And I think on GenerateBlocks, if I remember, we were having 4 to 5 or so.
Well, we only had like 12 total requests
12
when you
total,
were done a second ago. Yeah.
So we already did the CSS on this one. Oh, I actually haven't rerun this yet. So let's just point out we have 69 total requests. This is before doing any optimization. So, but now we're going to do the delay.js, and we'll run this again after we're at the very end here. So 30 JS files. Let's do the delay.js. We're going to do delay all in this instance. We'll enable the timeout. We'll go back down to save here. Okay, and we will clear the cache. Go back to our speed test tool. Wait for this to go here. Okay, straight to a 99.
That's nuts.
So, I mean, this gives you an idea right off the bat of, look at just everything here once we enable delay.js. This also does include the fonts, though. I didn't run this. I don't think I have the fonts. So fonts and delay.js. But it gives you an idea of how heavy JS is in Elementor. That is what's causing the slowdown for stuff. Now you can't fix it obviously here because we did it, but it's always JS usually with Elementor. That's the slowdown.
I will say this does fix the testing problem, right? Because if I have one of the huge reasons I left Elementor, not the only reason, but one of the huge reasons was all the performance issues, and getting this with flipping a couple of toggles in Perfmatters solves those testing problems. The thing you do also need to keep in mind is all those JavaScript files still do need to load for everybody, right? They're not loading immediately when this test is running. So like you talked about earlier, are we kind of tricking the test, manipulating the test a little bit? And in a way we are, because every time somebody loads your page, they're still going to have to load the 30 JavaScript files or whatever, whereas if you're using something a little bit leaner, they just don't exist, you know?
But those files aren't needed yet. So yes, you are tricking it. But so let me point out here. So we're going to reload this page. Actually, let me go to the front end here. And we'll go to the home page. So if we pull this up here, I'm going to re-click here, JS. So if we, oops, I think this might still be cached here. There we go. So you can see here only lazy load is running. Everything else is delayed. Now they just kicked in because but the thing is, the page to render the page, it didn't need those. So is that really tricking it? I mean, it is, but it didn't actually need those before that to do any of this stuff.
Right. I guess my point is if we're trying to make the website use less resources and actually
this is not the way to do
consume
that.
less bytes of data, well then use something lighter.
Exactly.
But this does fix, I mean, this fixes the testing problem. And as long as it's loading visually correctly, then I don't see any problem with it either.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. It's not fixing the root of the problem, which is why I hate this and I love it at the same time. It's super powerful. It works great. But also you're not fixing the problem. Like there's still, look at down here, there's still 69 requests here. 30 of them are JavaScript, 170 kilobytes. It's just, it's bonkers. So you're basically doing the best you can for Elementor is what I could say.
And to Elementor's defense, I also built this site a long time ago when I was not counting how many JavaScript requests there are. So I'm sure if I went in and tweaked some of this, we could get this down, just by itself with Elementor too. This is certainly not an optimized website.
For sure. And I see like for shim here, I already know this is coming from the old version of Font Awesome, which they have an option in their settings to go turn off Font Awesome 4 because 5 is already packaged. So like we could get rid of this by just using an option in Elementor. So
gotcha.
Like to your point, there are ways you could trim this down more. But regardless, you're still going to be, you're going to be dealing with a lot of JavaScript. So let's go back. There's one last thing I wanted to do. I just wanted to see here is we're going to preload this header image, this lady in the background, just like we did on the other site. You can also use this too. We have this automated one here. I'm doing it manually just because I'm doing it. I want it to do exactly what I want right now, but you can play with this as well. It's still in beta. We're still trying to tweak things. So we'll choose image. We have that accounting home lady image here. Save changes. We'll clear the cache, and then we'll just run our speed test one more time. It might not have a big impact, but again, I always like to preload the hero images.
We did have a question here. They asked, what about the render blocking requests in CSS?
We kind of covered that early, but I might not have talked about it too much. Is those should get fixed when you're using unused CSS, because with unused CSS, it's picking apart the CSS, so it can't be render blocking anymore. It's only loading what's used. So if that makes sense, you're not loading anything that's not used, and it's not loaded in a render blocking way. So it's
I think when we did our last video, the reducing unused CSS was in beta in the Perfmatters plugin at that point, and it's not anymore. So I'm guessing that's a pretty safe option to use.
It is. We use it. I mean, we've been using it on all of our sites since beta, and it's been out for 6-7 months now. It's been out for a while now, and we did take it out of beta, and I use it on client sites that I work on personally. So I'm comfortable with it now. I think the only thing I would say is that we are still like, as tickets come in, we see like, oh, here's an exclusion, like the Elementor one with the uploads dynamic folder. Here's one that just you always need. It actually doesn't cause any warnings because that CSS is used. So we need to add this as the default, just so you don't have to do anything. We're still adding kind of those in the background. So that will get better over time, though, as we keep adding stuff. But yeah, unused CSS is great for fixing unused CSS warnings and for fixing render blocking. Even though it wasn't really designed to fix that, it just does because of how it works.
A good side effect.
CSS that's not there anymore can't be render blocking. Okay, so here we go. I don't think it didn't change our LCP much at all. So in this site, it didn't really do much, but again, it's always something good to do. And yeah, there we go. Elementor. If I spent some more time on this, I probably could get this to 100. I think in my doc,
Yeah, in your test, you did have it 100.
I did have it 100 in my mobile test when I was doing this in trial through. So, maybe I missed something, or the variations can vary just slightly too with testing and latency and the server speed. And so, but again, I think you get our point. Like we could keep doing tweaks and stuff, but
I mean, at this point, you have nothing to complain about with the performance if you're getting a 99 on here, especially if you're used to the kinds of scores I'm used to getting with Elementor. Like when we started this site, it was getting a 56 or whatever. A 99 is plenty good.
Yeah, this is the beginning. So 52 to 99.
And obviously, we spent 30 minutes doing the second site, talking about each one of these things, but it was probably 3 minutes worth of work if you were sitting down to go do it. It's not a lot of work.
This would have taken me probably 5-10 minutes at the most to just go through. And I would have probably been distracted by Slack and did something else and come back. So if you're really just sitting there doing it, only a few minutes. So that's really the crazy thing. Now, when you have more, I would say, other third-party plugins like the Smart Slider thing we used, and you have to or dash icons with Ninja Forms, and you have to dive into the script manager stuff, then you can spend more time tweaking. And then it can take up more time. But again, you don't have to do that stuff. It's just how optimized do you want to get, I guess.
Well, I think, for a lot of people, especially those that aren't nuts like us, that want to see the little fireworks emojis or animations in Lighthouse reports when you score all 100s. Most people just want to pass the test. You know what I mean? They want to see the score in green and then they're happy, and that's definitely possible without a whole lot of work inside of Perfmatters.
And I will say this, as an agency, honestly, it's probably a waste of time in some respect. If you're already at a 99 and you're spending hours trying to get to that 100, that is not a good use of your time, probably.
No, it is a total ego stroke. I'll admit it, and I do it all the time. But yes,
yeah, I do it too. I'm OCD. I'd probably go back and do, what can I do to get this? But again, it depends on how much time you have, what your client wants. For most people, that would probably be a waste of time. So get it to the green, move on.
It's diminishing returns for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Make good use of your time. 80-20 rule.
That site is fully loaded in half of a second. That blows my mind with how much is going on, and the fact that site's 4 years old. That's nuts.
Yeah, and here I'm actually going to bring this back out. So here I had here's the link from GTmetrix from where's the other one? Oh, whoops, I grabbed the wrong one. Let me grab here's the before for GTmetrix. We can see a fully load time 1 second. This is before Perfmatters was enabled during anything. Fully load time 1 second. Again, desktop already scores great. Usually it's the mobile that's always the problem. But if we go back to fully done now, whoops, we'll see, 542. And the other one I think we just ran too was, oh, whoops, that's the wrong one. 1206, or this is the most recent one. So 542 milliseconds. I mean,
what are we down to on the total number of requests down there? I know we started out at 69.
Let's see here. So we're at 16 requests. 16.
Yeah, and I can't do math, but that's a lot less.
It is. And again, I would say that is tricking partially, like you said, it is masking some of the underlying issue. But again, when you have 30 JS files, there is no tool or technology that exists to take those JS files apart and only load what's being used. And it's not like Unused CSS where you can parse it and kind of do that. It's the only option you have with JS is defer it, which will not fix it in this case, because deferring all of those 30 files will just move it into the bottom and not fix everything. So delay is really your only option. So I hate to say that.
I think where there's probably some bad blood there is, and now I can't think of the name. I was going to use their name and now I can't even think of it.
There was a plugin or a service that came out a few years back, and you basically turned it on, and automatically all your scores were 100. And now I can't think of the name of that
I think
stinking
I know
thing.
the one you know. I don't know if I'm name drop them, but
Yeah, I was going to name drop them. I just can't.
okay,
The name
well,
has left my brain.
NitroPack.
Yes, NitroPack. And I think that got the reputation of being kind of like black hat performance, like black hat SEO. And I think maybe there's some confusion. If you have anything to say what you're doing might be different than what they're doing, I think that would be worth clearing up.
Yeah, well, I would say, first off, ours is off by default. We also have the delay individual JS scripts. So you don't have to use the delay all. You can delay individual scripts. If you're on a GeneratePress site, maybe you just want to delay that Fathom script. Maybe you want to just still let all your other JS load on GeneratePress and just delay that Fathom one. So I feel like we give you more options to go like, you don't want to delay it. You don't
have to go full nuclear.
Or you can go full nuclear and if you want. However, we still I use the script manager all the time to get rid of stuff that should never be loading in certain places to begin with. And what that will do is then you don't need to delay that because it's DQ'd to begin with. So that's always the way you should treat things. But again, we live in a world where that is not always the case. Some people aren't super tech savvy either. So the script manager can be overwhelming for some folks too. Having, I think, all of these different options gives you at least your choice. If you want to go full nuclear, you can. If you want to really treat it how you should, which I, use GeneratePress, use GenerateBlocks, use the script manager. But again, yeah, we give you choices, I guess.
Gotcha. We did have somebody asking here if there's a community for Perfmatters that they could join to avoid having to contact support for silly questions.
I do not participate in Facebook groups. Yours is actually honestly the only one in years that I've even ever commented in. And it's because nothing against, I'm sure you have a great Facebook audience. I know you do. But they become such a waste of time for me. And I use these social media blocker extensions. So when I go to Facebook, I don't see any notifications or something. I use it just to communicate with my family or post something about what I'm working on. So I use social media in a different way than most people, just because I view it as some of it as a waste of time.
Well, I told them they can use the admin bar as an unofficial place to talk about Perfmatters. Kind of works the same with Termageddon. We have a lot of Termageddon questions come up, and Termageddon doesn't have a group. But yeah, but I don't think you're bugging Brian by sending in support, questions if you have.
Oh yeah, no, always reach out to us. That's, I think, where we're different than some of the other plugins. That's why we don't offer lifetime deals. That's why we don't do some of this other stuff, specifically because I'd rather have you reach out to us than us offering these stupid lifetime deals. That I want to help you myself or my brother who actually build the plugin, rather than you getting help from some random tier support rep that doesn't actually know how the code underlying works. If you're working with us, we built the plugin, so we know exactly why it's not working right when we see your ticket. So I feel like we can do support tickets pretty freaking fast. But again, also please don't be offended if I don't maybe respond in a Facebook tag or a community sometimes, because again, I try to ignore all Facebook,
We all understand that, believe me. I spend my entire day with multiple Facebook tabs open, but I know exactly what you mean. Two questions. We'll wrap this up here. In fact, if you want to unshare, we can go back to looking at us for a moment. We had a couple questions about purchasing Perfmatters. Vicky had asked if there's any kind of discount code besides the 10% one that they see on your website. They didn't know if there's any special deals.
Did we set one up for you? If not, we can do that after the call for sure.
I don't think we set anything up for this. I did share my my affiliate link in there, but okay. Well, I'll Vicky, follow up with us after this. We'll have something for you. And then Luis asks, is there an easy way to reactivate a canceled subscription?
Reactivate a canceled subscription?
I'm guessing she's subscribed to Perfmatters at some point and canceled. Is there a good way to reactivate that subscription?
So if you cancel a subscription, we use Easy Digital Downloads. If you cancel it, you still get updates and support through the remainder of the subscription, even though it's canceled. The cancel just cancels the billing next time.
Gotcha.
So,
but if they want to go re-up again, they want to repurchase it, they can just log into their account and do it from the My Account area?
they can, yeah. However, I wouldn't do that because then you're technically probably losing some money. You should just wait until your time to renew comes and then just renew it then.
Okay. So yeah, so Luis,
sense.
if you'll log into the Perfmatters site, see when your renewal date is, and resubscribe when you're closer to the renewal
if your
date.
renewal date is 6 months out,
right,
and you just canceled it, that means you just canceled the billing, but you still get updates and support through those 6 months. And then you can, resubscribe or repurchase after that. Now, if we had refunded you for some reason, then you wouldn't get updates. That's a different story, but yeah.
Gotcha. And I wanted to ask you too, you had mentioned briefly Novashare. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so Novashare is, this is full disclosure. I have disclosures everywhere saying that I used to work at Kinsta. So obviously I'm a big Kinsta fan. And I use Kinsta for our site still. That while I was working at Kinsta, I use so many different social plugins, like even on our own blog at Kinsta. And I just had so many frustrations. Like they're too bloated, or they had these little nitpicky things that I couldn't get work, or they were loading too many scripts. They used jQuery, so many things I hated. And so I was like, we need to do our own plugin. So we had our Perfmatters plugin, and we learned a lot about performance throughout that over the years. And so we're like, let's do a social plugin because we want one for our own sites, but let's do it the right way. Let's think about performance first before all these fancy other features. So we might not add every feature out there. And if you want that, go to a different plugin. We're solely based on super fast, super small scripts. We don't use jQuery. That's all we care about. But we still pack quite a few features in, but we're always refactoring our code to try to even get it smaller.
If you guys want to see an example, obviously, if you go to the novashare.io, is that right?
Yeah. Novashare.io.
Okay. If you go there, you can see lots of examples. I'm going to plug the Termageddon website. If you go to that, I just put a link in there. If you go to their blog page, I've used the Novashare at the bottom of a blog article, just above the author bio. You can see a sample of it there, but there's ways to have the floating icons on the side of the page and all that. It's a very cool little plugin. So if you're looking for ways to do the social sharing, I know some of those things are built into something like Elementor, probably why I have so many scripts loading on that website. But things like GenerateBlocks, all that's not built in. So you do need a third party to do it. And that's definitely the best I found. So I wanted to make sure we got a second to talk about that.
Yeah, and once you get into all the crazy, we have tons of stuff for Pinterest, pinning, hiding pins. Once you get into all the nitty gritty stuff, that stuff's not built in to the page builders. So it depends on how far you need to go to. And we just added a block too for our social follow widget. So we're we fully embrace the blocks, and we're really focused on the block stuff now. So
nice. You mentioned Kinsta. This is actually how I found Brian. I was at a WordCamp, and this book was free on a little table somewhere, and I picked it up. I'm like, this is the greatest book ever. And that's actually how I found your name the first time, and then ended up writing you out of the blue for help with something on Docket WP a while back. So it's funny. That's how it started, though, is I found that book and found you.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, a lot of sleepless nights went into writing a lot of work.
I'm sure.
So yeah.
I do really enjoy the fact, though, that when I do promos for when we're going to talk, I can put the guy who literally wrote the book on WordPress performance, because you literally wrote the book on WordPress performance. That's just my little marketing copywriting fun. Well, Brian, I certainly appreciate all this today. It is absolutely amazing what you've done with this plugin, but the fact that you've spent all this time to educate people on how to use it and what's actually going on behind the scenes. There's lots of really good plugins out there across WordPress, right? There's lots of really great pieces of software, but there's this sweet spot, and there's very few of them like this, where you find not only is it really good software, but there's people behind it that are really good, that are willing to do all of these things to help folks out. I just mentioned our giveaway that we got coming up inside the admin bar. Brian donated stuff to that for the giveaway. He's come on here and do several of these calls with us. I'm sure I'll bug him for another one in the future, so you'll see him again at some point. But I just really want to thank you for doing all that and supporting the community, supporting our community with all your help. It's very appreciated. Most plugin developers don't go that extra mile, and I just want you to know that we do appreciate that.
Well, yeah, I'm glad we can help. And again, I will stress, if you have any issues, please reach out to us. Like sending us an email. We view emails as an opportunity to get better. That's how we treat every single ticket. Like if something's not in our docs that we have in a ticket, I end up getting it added to our docs. If we need to fix a bug. So like tickets actually, in our opinion, we like tickets, which is a weird thing to say, because it helps us get better. We see like the problems that you're having, and that allows us to fix those problems, hopefully automated in a better fashion going down the road. So
absolutely. And as we're wrapping up, we're getting a lot of thanks from everybody. For those of you who stuck around for like, I don't know, we started 2 hours and 20 minutes ago. Thank you for sticking around. My YouTube watch time will really enjoy that. But thank you guys for hanging out. If you do have questions, post them. I'll post the replays and everything inside the group. Post stuff in there. I'll try to answer everything I can. And if I can't, I'll write Brian and see what we can get on answers. Got another person that said while they were watching this, they got their heavy from 78 to 100 in an hour. So lots of good results already on this. I think in the thread, I'm going to ask everybody to kind of post what their before and after results were, because it's just fun to see how much better people can get with just a few little tweaks.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right, fantastic. Well, we'll wrap it up, guys. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you for hanging out here with us today. And Brian, thank you so much again for doing all this. I look forward to the next time we get to talk again. Maybe next time we'll try something that we know only takes an hour, and we'll see if that works for us.
Well, yeah, and thanks for you for putting this together too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited. This answers so many questions for me too.
There's never enough time. I think my notes, I think I have images in here, but it's 76 pages in my Google Doc for this thing.
I was going to say, Brian said, I put together some notes for the call and sent me the link. It's a Google Doc that's 78 pages long and has over 5,000 words in it. So not only did he put the 2 hours and 20 minutes in today on the call, he put several hours in before that to make sure everything was ready for y'all to roll on today's call.
Yeah.
So
and hopefully it's helpful. And again, we can't cover everything, unfortunately. I mean, we see all sorts of stuff every day. We see something new every day. So it's impossible with how big WordPress is to ever cover everything in a video like this. So.
Well, I did comment to a few people that asked, what about this plugin with that thing? I'm like, just reach out to Brian. I'm sure he can take care of you. So buy Perfmatters just to get access to Brian and Brett so they can answer all of your questions. So that's the cheapest performance consulting you'll ever get. So,
and ironically, we always do this right on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. So enjoy the weekend, Brian. You'll be working. Next time we'll do it on a Monday, I promise.
But yeah, no, all right. Always reach out to us. We'll get back to you. So.
Yeah, we're just kidding. All right, everybody, I hope you have a great weekend, and we will talk with you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
Woo!